forces have shot down an Iranian drone operating in a sensitive area of the Middle East. Following this news is Sierra Claire. She's a foreign policy expert. Sierra, thanks so much for being here with us this morning. According to military officials, this was an unmanned aircraft. It was deemed a potential threat as it came in close proximity of American personnel and assets. What's your takeaways on this drone that was near our U.S. personnel?
Yeah, well, this is the second one of these, Vanessa. And so luckily our naval personnel have been able to shoot those down with no further complications. But really, a lot of potential for escalation here because of the tensions already being so high. And I'm not sure what the Iranian regime is hoping to gain from this. I mean, obviously, these are intelligence gathering operations, but that's a pretty big risk on their part. I can tell you that the Iranian people, where they're at with it is they were excited because they were hoping it might spark up some more tensions and maybe lead to President Trump doing some strikes on Iran as he has talked about. Now, I don't know. President Trump has a lot of ways that he can respond. And so I think it's good that these issues have gone through with no further escalation. But it's just interesting to see from the Iranian people's side, they're definitely not afraid of things heating up here.
Yeah, and the U.S. defense systems were activated. They successfully intercepted that drone, no injuries or damage. But it goes back, this was the USS Abraham that they were around and maybe targeting. We don't know, but that was shot down. And Sierra, I see this when it comes across, and I'm thinking, okay, like you just mentioned, President Trump has many different angles that he can go with this, and maybe they're testing the waters. Iran is to see what he will do, or to maybe make their next move in this chess game.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're also leading up to these diplomatic talks that they're scheduling for Friday. And so, a lot of mind games potentially going on here. Maybe the Iranians are trying to show some kind of force or send some kind of message. But if they did, it didn't work out very well on their part because their drone got shot down, but without us even having to touch it.
Absolutely. Well, that's the best military in the world. And so we would have pretty much bet on that before we even knew this was going to happen. I'm sure they did as well. But we'll continue to follow what's happening with the talks with Iran. I have different things I want to talk to you about today. One of them being to the United States and India reaching a major trade agreement aimed at easing months of tariff tension. Now, this will boost bilateral commerce. We have this post from the president. He was talking about that this week. What is your take on what's going on with that agreement?
Well, this agreement is really key for a couple of reasons. Number one reason, just being the media, the global media has been after President Trump, as you know, as we've covered, that his tariffs are failing, that he's causing all kinds of tensions, that he's losing allies by imposing these tariffs and making trade fair for America. And India was a big one that they said, it's a mistake on Trump's part to lose a relationship with India. And in fact, we're seeing again, this is the fake news. Trump has a great relationship with India. They got this trade deal done. Him and Modi exchanged birthday messages to each other a couple months ago. And then you saw President Trump praised him on that Truth Social post. So really strong relationship there with India. And the other part of this deal is that it may affect the Russia-Ukraine peace talks. President Trump put out a statement earlier this week saying that he is, for the first time, feeling positive about the progress on Russia Ukraine and this India trade deal with India agreeing to buy Venezuelan oil and US oil and draw down on their Russian oil purchases is having a big effect on that. And it's going to move along these peace talks and potential diplomacy on that part and see a lot of progress there.
I'm glad you mentioned Russia because that was going to be my next question to you, how Russia played a part in all of this. You just answered that question. So we'll continue to watch that as well. Also, Cuba. There's been a lot of talk since we went into Venezuela and got the leader there. President Trump having conversations with Cuban leaders. I believe, Sierra, it's in the beginning stages dealing with fuel supply. President Trump was asked about this recently on Fox News. Let's listen to that and then get your take.
Get to that.
I know, but it's unbelievable.
Can Cuba survive without Venezuelan oil? I don't see how it can.
Can who survive?
Cuba.
No, Cuba totally relies on Venezuela for money and for oil, and they give Venezuela protection. That was always the deal. They're very tough. They're good soldiers. They got wiped out, as you know.
Yeah.
3 days ago, wiped out. I don't want to even say how many, but they got wiped out. But Cuba gives protection to Venezuela, and Venezuela gives Cuba money through oil.
Yeah.
And it's worked that way for a long time.
You talked
But
about.
it doesn't work that way anymore. So I don't know what Cuba's going to do. I think Cuba's going to fail. I don't think there are any alternatives for Cuba.
I don't know how they survive without Venezuelan
We have
energy.
great people from Cuba. Marco Rubio is great. He knows Cuba very
Some
well.
people said, somebody told me today it was Marco's revenge.
Well, maybe it was, but they a lot of great people.
Yeah.
A lot of great people. We'll see what happens.
Well, you live in South
we want
Florida.
to do something to help Cuba.
Yeah. Let me. You mentioned Vladimir Putin.
You know the Cubans I want to help? I want to help the Cubans in the United States that got treated so badly by Castro.
Let's talk about the first part of that, how Cuba needs Venezuela.
Right. Well, Venezuela was providing Cuba with oil at a very large discount or even free in some cases. And in exchange, Cuba was providing those guards that you actually saw in some of that footage from the Maduro raid. Those were Cuban guards. They provided other security services to Venezuela. And so now without that, they were getting some fuel from Mexico, and I believe President Trump has also worked on a deal with Mexico, so that they are also kind of withdrawing a lot of what they were providing as well, and basically just isolating that Cuban regime.
Yeah, and President Trump, the second part of that, Sierra, talking about the Cuban Americans here in the States. Florida is a neighbor right there close to Cuba. The Cuban population is massive there, for example, and the people here are escaping that regime, like he just mentioned, and trying to find a better life. So I have to think, one of the first countries that I thought about whenever we went into Venezuela was Cuba, because those people know what it's like to live under that type of dictatorship. And so, Sierra, they have to have some hope that things will get better for them under President Trump.
Absolutely, Vanessa. We have a very strong lobby here, as you mentioned, from a lot of lawmakers from Florida who are have Cuban ties, and they are, kind of representing those interests as well. And like you said, the Cuban people, they are hoping for freedom. They are hoping for relief. They've been living, in scarcity for decades, and what we're seeing with a recent post from the State Department actually said advising Americans not to travel to Cuba because of fuel shortages causing widespread electric grid outages, and that could affect things like hospitals and traffic lights. So kind of a higher dangerous situation. And so what that is signaling to me is that This fuel crisis is real. We've heard kind of mentions of it here and there, but it's happening as we speak. And what President Trump is predicting and wanting to happen is currently happening. The regime is starved, and they're going to have to make a deal with President Trump. They don't have a choice.
While I have you, we have a couple of minutes left here, Sierra. While I have you, we've talked about Iran, we've talked about Venezuela, Cuba. There are members in Congress and some of the Democrats who are saying President Trump is putting so much focus on other countries that he needs to worry about his homeland, but he's doing both. The naysayers are saying that he ran on the promise of America first, but I think they're failing to realize that whenever we have these great relationships with other countries, that helps out America. What's your take when you see these comments? I see them all the time, almost every day. People, the naysayers out there saying, why is he worried about what's going on in the Middle East or in Venezuela when he should be worried about his home turf? Your reaction to those critics?
Well, Vanessa, I would say there's a couple things. The first thing is that we cannot forget history. The President Trump's term is not happening in a vacuum. And what Biden did made the whole world so much more dangerous. And the big example of that is allowing that Russia-Ukraine war to happen that Trump has said he would have never let happen. And I believe him. And so then there's these problems that do require the United States and the White House to turn focus outward. And the second part of that is that, as you talked about, President Trump is protecting American interests. This is America first. These relationships do serve domestic policy. All of these trade deals help our economy. Energy dominance helps us have strategic competition with China and not be dependent on them and have national security, compromising national security by, relying on China for critical things. So all of this stuff is also serving the domestic agenda at the same time, and they do work together. And then some of these things, the Cuban regime, the Maduro regime, the Iran regime, people looking at, like you said, oh, why is he looking at the Middle East? Because this is a real opportunity, and President Trump is one of the few who can manage it responsibly because he's established such peace through strength. And so taking down some of these regimes that have just been persistent problems for America, it might not seem like an immediate need, but the opportunity is, there, and President Trump wants to look at it and see what he can do about it.
When you grade President Trump, Senator Marco Rubio, he mentioned him earlier in that interview on Fox News about being from Cuba. Sierra, I have to ask you what grade you would give them so far 1 year into his administration and what they're doing with everything abroad.
I would say an A. I would give him an A. Maybe not an A plus just yet. We'll see. We'll see about this Iran thing. But really they've just done so well. And Marco Rubio, was kind of a surprise, I think, coming from the Hill, and nobody really knew what he was going to be like as Secretary of State, and you've just seen him grow into that role. A lot of people saying he's the best Secretary of State we've ever had. So really great job with the team there.
I agree with you. And then I want everyone to follow you. We appreciate you coming on whenever there's lots to talk about with foreign policy, and then also some of the articles you send our way to put on LindellTV.com. But you're also on Substack. How can people follow you?
Yeah, my Substack is sierranock.substack.com, and I'm also on X at Cerise Dumatin.
I like it. All right, Sierra, always a pleasure to have you. I know you're in California, and so it's a little early for you now joining us, but we appreciate you coming on and giving us updates.
Thanks so much, Vanessa.
And we're going to take a quick